Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host, here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I am going to share my review of Warhammer 40k Roleplay Imperium Maledictum from Cubicle 7 Entertainment. This is written by Dave Allen, Emmett Byrne, Tim Cox, Zach Dale Clutterbuck, John Dunn, Michael Duxbury, Cody Falk, Tim Huckleberry, D.G. Laudenroot, Elaine Lithgow, T.S. Lukehart, Dominic McDowell, Pedrig Murphy, and Sam Taylor. This 368-page hardcover came out this month, carries an MSRP of $59.99, which includes the PDF if you order from Cubicle 7 Entertainment or one of their bit and mortar partners, or you can grab just the PDF alone over at DriveThruRPG for $29.99. All that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Warhammer 40k Roleplay Imperium Maledictum. Before I dive on in, I want to point out a few things. First of all, my friends over at Cubicle 7 Entertainment were kind enough to provide me with Imperium Maledictum, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. And these days, it's very, very important that you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a very good feel for what you're going to find inside Imperium Maledictum, talk about the mechanics, and share my thoughts about the game overall. Lastly, I had a contest during the live stream for our first look at Warhammer 40k Roleplay Imperium Maledictum. Say that 5 times fast. And I have the winners of that contest. Now, it doesn't matter if you watch live or watch on Memorex. I did give you instructions on how you could get into the running to win a copy in PDF. And I've got 3 winners. They are Ben Jackson Ellery, 4267, Puente 29712, and Ben Collins 9663. Strangely enough, all the winners have numbers in their YouTube nicknames. Haven't seen that before. Now, all you've got to do is send an email to jeffmcaleer@thegaminggang.com from the email address which is associated with your YouTube account, which is going to be a Gmail email address. And I will be sure to get you your copy of Imperium Maledictum in PDF. All right, let's jump on in. Few things to get into as we take a peek inside. First of all, production quality, really well done. Paper stock, nice and thick. I believe this book should hold up to a lot of repeated use at your game table. Should also mention, I am not overly familiar with recent Warhammer 40k developments. I think the last time I really played any of the Games Workshop releases that had to do with Warhammer 40k was probably around 3rd edition, thereabouts. And we never really played much Warhammer 40k. We focused more on Epic, which I think they have changed the name of now. I think at one point, I think they called it Space Marine, and then it became Epic. Or I know it was Adeptus Tyrannicus. It was the 6mm miniatures. I had tons of that. Now, the funny thing is, I used to buy all the splat books and everything. Just really didn't play. Always dug the setting as I do Warhammer Fantasy. Just really didn't have an opportunity to play much. So we start off with a bit of background about the setting. This takes place in the Macharian Sector, and your player characters are troubleshooters for the Empire. And the first thing the players and the game master are going to do is they're going to create a patron for the player characters. Now, these patrons can come from a variety of different factions. And really, the sort of adventures you want to engage in is going to determine the sort of patron you're going to have. So as an example, they could be a Forge Lord or Arch-Confessor, Canonist, Criminal Mastermind, a Guild Master. They could be a Rogue Trader. There's all various different types of patrons, and the patrons are going to have various boons, which are benefits to the player characters, and they will also have some less beneficial aspects to them, which will be secrets from the players, the liabilities. And I know there are probably people out there who are thinking to themselves, yeah, you know what? I don't want my player character to have a patron. I don't know if this is something that maybe down the line in an Imperium Maledictum campaign that you would move away from. Maybe you would outgrow your patron. But at this point in time, that is how this is set up, that you'll have a patron. They're not necessarily only a quest giver. They're also a source of information and resources for the player characters too. Then we get into creating your character, and I like how in Imperium Maledictum, we had the same sort of setup as we do with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, where in sections where you have a choice, you could roll randomly, and if you roll randomly, you will actually get additional experience points for you to spend to improve your character. I thought that was kind of cool, where it's, well, I'm just going to put my character into the hands of fate, and then you get some extra experience points to boost your character before starting your adventuring career. So the characteristics we've got, your attributes that you've got are pretty much identical to what we have seen in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And as far as I understand from past Fantasy Flight games, role-playing games, I got to inform you, I can't tell you what differences there might be between Imperium Maledictum and Only War or Dark Heresy or any of the Warhammer 40k role-playing games that came out from Fantasy Flight games, because I have no experience with those whatsoever. I never even read them. So sorry if you're curious, I can't help you out in that respect. So we've got the various different attributes like weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, agility, intelligence, perception, willpower, and fellowship. We also have some derived attributes from those as well. So this is a percentile-based role-playing game. So at its essence, you're going to have your attributes, you're going to have skills. They are going to have a percentage chance of success or failure. And what you're looking to do is roll equal to or less than your skill level. So as an example, let's say you're attacking an orc with a melee weapon. You would be rolling your weapon skill, and hopefully you don't have any negative modifiers, but let's just say it's the straight up 45 that you've got. You're going to roll your percentile dice and simply look to roll equal to or less than 45 to possibly succeed. Now, the reason why I say possibly succeed is there may be a situation where you need to achieve a certain success level in order to succeed, or to succeed well enough at what you're trying to do. Now, this isn't just combat. This is with many tests as far as seeing if you succeed or fail. So we've got success levels, and it might be a little different to wrap your head around if you play other role-playing games and you've never played, like, say, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. So to figure out your success level, either positive or negative, all you have to do is take a look at the dice you rolled, what is the score, and compare it to that skill level. So in that same situation, let's say I rolled a 9, so 0, 9. You're going to take just a look at the 10s. You don't have to worry about the single digit. So you're looking at the 10s. That'd be a 0. And that gets deducted from the 10s of your skill, which is a 45 in this case. So I would have a success level of 4, which is actually an impressive success. Now let's flip the script on that a little bit. And let's say I rolled an 89. Well, now you're looking at a -4 as far as my success level. That would be an impressive failure. So the players are going to choose from a faction that their character belongs to, as well as their role within the group, such as a savant or a warrior or a zealot, someone whose faith in the emperor is what drives them. Pretty cool. I like this quite a lot. We will also have our skills, and then we have talents. And this is a percentile-based game, but this is not like, say, a basic role-playing game like Call of Cthulhu or RuneQuest. We don't have a huge list of skills, and these skills tend to be relatively broad. So as an example, ranged, which would utilize your ballistic skill. That is your starting rating. And of course, you can increase your skills. It's easier to increase skills than it is to increase your attributes points-wise using your experience points. It's more expensive for you to raise your attribute than it is simply a skill. But as an example, we've got presence, which is your willpower. There are some skills which are comprised of an average of more than one attribute, but not too many. They're mainly just tied into one. Then we've got our talents, and there are a lot of talents like acute sense, bone breaker, drilled, duelist, ever vigilant, frenzy, gallows humor. I like gallows humor. Gunslinger, psyker, read lips. So quite a few of those. Then we get into our gear section. So we've got weapons and armor, equipment, and of course we've got our tried and true Warhammer 40k weapons like chain swords and bolters, melta guns. I will point out, I wish there was more artwork in this book. I felt the artwork overall compared to other Cubicle 7 Entertainment core books, such as, yes, once again, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which I'm a huge fan of. I really, really enjoy Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I think it's so well done. The adventures tend to be fun, and it's got a little bit of that kind of twisted sense of humor to it. I am a huge fan. And I've got to say that I feel that there's way more artwork in that core book, which clocks in around the same page count than what we're seeing here in Imperium Maledictum. Then, of course, we've got our Psyker powers if you are playing Psykers, or, of course, if you're going to encounter Psykers, which, of course, you will at some point in your adventuring. So we have minor powers and major powers. And then we start getting into the actual rules of the game. So we go about 180 pages or so before we actually get into the rules. And the rules don't take up a whole huge amount of page count. So here are the rules. So we're going to get into tests, how to make a test, determining your success level, difficulty of tests. So it's possible there's maybe a plus 10 modifier if something's easier, or plus 20 modifier to your skill if something's extremely easy, just like maybe minus 10, minus 20 if something's far more difficult. Then we get a little bit of a flow chart. I like how we've got these so they stand out. I thought that was very cool. And then we've got the outcomes table, which is essentially telling you, okay, so you got a -1 as far as your success level. What does that mean? No, it's failure. No, you just plain didn't succeed. Nothing incredible, nothing else to worry about. You just didn't pull off what you were trying to do. Just like if you had a +1, okay, you succeeded. You didn't do it with a flourish, and you didn't do it especially outstandingly well, but you did what you were trying to accomplish. And then we get into combat. Combat is very deadly, as it is in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I like role-playing games that have high lethality in their combat because I enjoy games where players are trying to think of other ways to address a challenging situation as opposed to just kill it, it moved, get it. I like parlay. I like role-playing parlay and trying to outwit your enemies as opposed to, oh, great, it's time for another combat. Now, that's not to say I don't enjoy combat. I just try to make it really something memorable as opposed to, oh, you hit so much damage. Oh, okay. Now, I will point out that your player characters really don't experience any sort of negative modifiers when they're taking wounds until they start taking critical wounds. When they take critical wounds, those will have negative effects on their player characters' actions. Something to keep in mind. This is not a game where it's like, okay, well, you're lightly wounded, you're heavily wounded. No, you'll have a maximum number of wounds. The important thing is when you start taking critical wounds. And it's not unusual for you to one-shot NPCs and NPCs one-shot player characters. We also have Fate, which is essentially bennies, if you're familiar with Savage Worlds, where you can spend these points. It is a currency that the player characters have, and they earn from good role-playing and things along those lines, successfully achieving objectives. And it can be spent to reroll dice and absorb damage, avoid critical wounds. So there is a bit of a buffer as far as the player characters getting one shot as often as NPCs will. We do have at the end of the book in the appendices, we'll have our lists of the various different critical wound charts. So we get some downtime info, we get some pages devoted to that, and then we'll start moving into the actual setting information. Right here on the next page here. And of course, as I had mentioned before, I don't have really any recent experience with Warhammer 40k outside of the Wrath and Glory role-playing game, which it has been a while since I've seen anything for that from Cubicle 7 Entertainment. But I've got to say, this section here really does fill in some blanks. So if you're someone who doesn't have any experience whatsoever with Warhammer 40k, maybe you've got an overall understanding of the setting, don't be scared off to dip your toes into Imperium Maledictum, because there is a lot of information in here. Now, this takes place in the Macharian Sector, and I'm not sure if this is a wholesale creation of Cubicle 7 Entertainment, or if this is an area in Warhammer 40k that is very familiar with players who play Warhammer 40k games. I honestly don't know. But this is really, really interesting. I gotta say, this is some of the better setting information, or I know as a lot of people refer to it, fluff, that I've read in the past year or so. It got my juices flowing where it's like, oh, yeah, you know, that's really interesting. Oh, that's pretty cool. I'm intrigued. I'll be very honest, I probably would not feel all that comfortable running Imperium Maledictum simply because I don't have the sort of 40k experience for my players, because I kind of rely on background quite a bit. Oh, it's the Macaleer system. Oh, no, it's the Maleer system. But I'll tell you what, I would certainly really get a kick out of playing this Just like I really like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Once again, I will mention that. That I don't have really any issue running because I have run it. I just think, at least myself personally, that my players would be demanding that I know everything about the Macharian system and everything else Warhammer 40k before I dove into running it. So we do get a game master section. It's not a huge amount of page space, but there are some good tips to this. We do get a bit of a bestiary that is focused on various different NPCs and types of NPC roles. So an astropath, Sister of Silence, a tech priest. And as you can see, the stat blocks aren't huge. They're not massive. They don't require tons of memorization. So here we've got the Battle Sister. I should also mention that the power level of the player characters in Imperium Maledictum is relatively low, especially compared to, say, Wrath and Glory. The players are not going to take on the roles of, say, Space Marines. That is outside the realm of this game at this point. And to be honest, I think it is going to remain outside the realm because there is a certain power level, a certain boots on the ground grittiness that is the aim for Imperium Maledictum. Now we get some Xeno information. So we get the orcs, Daldari. I always call them Eldar because that's what I remember them as. And demons and so forth, forces of chaos. So we get into our different appendices. So as I mentioned, we've got the critical wounds, fumble table, curios. Here's our critical wound tables here. Head, arm, body, leg. We get our player character sheets. I thought this was kind of cool. I thought this was very interesting for players out there who have a lot of experience with Warhammer 40k, or at least more experience than I've got with Warhammer 40k. I want to play the sort of archetype. And it's like, okay, so this is the origin you want to take. This is the faction you want to take. This will be your role within the group. All right. So we've got our patron sheet and our index, and that wraps up Warhammer 40k Roleplay Imperium Maledictum from Cubicle 7 Entertainment. Let me swing on over to the other camera so I can share my final thoughts and give this a review score. I really like this. I like this quite a lot. And I am a fan of the mechanics, which are pretty much the underlying driver of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and of course now Imperium Maledictum for Warhammer 40k Roleplay. I like the fact that you are taking on characters with a lower power level. This is grimmer and grittier, boots on the ground, out on the mean streets, although it doesn't have to be in a city. It could be any place. But I really like what is presented in Imperium Maledictum. I think there is a lot of variety as far as the sorts of characters the players can take on. I like the patron aspect of the game, although I do understand there are going to be some folks out there who aren't going to want to have their characters beholden to anyone. I understand that, but I also like the fact that the players and the game master together are going to create the patron. Of course, the negative aspects of the patron will not be known to the players, but the sort of adventures that the players want to invest their time into can be addressed by a certain particular sort of patron. I like that a lot. Now, as far as the game mechanics, if you are familiar with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, these are going to be pretty old hat to you, to be very simple for you to slide right on in. Of course, yes, because of the science fiction setting as opposed to a fantasy setting, there are obviously different circumstantial rules that come into play, situational rules that will come into play. But all in all, pretty similar in their approaches. If you are familiar with percentile-based role-playing games, you should easily slide right on into Warhammer 40k Roleplay Imperium Maledictum as well. I do wish there was more artwork to the book. I did find it to be a little sparse, and a lot of times the artwork that we would find within are just kind of random sort of images. Doesn't really get those creative juices flowing as far as other role-playing games and artwork that shows characters or situations. Now, that's not to say there isn't any of that artwork in here. Just doesn't seem to be a ton of it. So I did want to mention that as well. All in all, I think this is a great start for Imperium Maledictum. I am really curious to see what is coming on the horizon for this. I do believe this should be pretty well supported by Cubicle 7 Entertainment, especially if Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is any indication. There will be plenty of content. Maybe some of it will be PDF only. A lot of adventures and things like that, kind of one-shot adventures for WIFRIP are like that. But all in all, I think the future looks very bright for this relatively grimdark science fiction role-playing game. On a scale of 0 to 10, I give Warhammer 40k Roleplay Imperium Maledictum an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's really good. I'm very interested to see what is on the horizon for this role-playing game as well. That's it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central right here on YouTube. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you will not find on the YouTube channel. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for watching. And until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you out there get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.